The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, is directed by Francis Lawrence and stars Tom Blythe, Rachel Zegler, Peter Dinklage, and among others. And this is the prequel to the Hunger Games films that came out in 2012, and based on also the book of the same name. And in this story, it is a prequel set 60 years or so before the events of the first Hunger Games film, where you have the rise of what would be known as President Snow and his early days when he was attending pretty much the Capitol and stuff, and him pretty much wanting to see things in his perspective, what essentially leads to the Hunger Games and everything, and having to see what it takes with the tributes and pretty much going into the games. And he also has a storyline going on where he goes into following this girl that's played by Rachel Zegler, named Lucy Gray, and he pretty much wants to see how in his mind wants to give the people more of the chance to try to do things for the greater good in his eyes. And there's more to it, but the way that he's going across, it's like you're starting to see the early days where he comes across as somewhat being nice and things like that, where he thinks that he's basically doing for the greater good. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this was directed by Francis Lawrence, who directed some of the other Hunger Games films, and I'll admit that when the first Hunger Games came out in 2012, it was quite a big surprise for me. I've never read the books, so I don't know how they compare with them. I hear that they're really good for young adult novels and stuff. They're really good young adult novels for a lot of younger folks and everything, and I can tell that when the first Hunger Games came out, I was really surprised by it, with it basically taking the whole kind of Running Man battle royale approach and doing things that were also a really good satirical commentary on reality television and stuff, and also really showcasing a lot of the stakes that it puts at risk with Jennifer Lawrence's character in that, having to go through the games and stuff, along with Josh Hutcherson's character in that. And the series itself, I've just always really been a big fan of, like, ever since the first Hunger Games. And even though I had some issues with a lot of the shaky cam and stuff like that, with it being able to get fixed with Francis Lawrence coming in as director for the next films, with Catching Fire and then the Mockingjay films, it really pushed more of the stakes and really showcased a lot of the intensity of what happens with everything that goes beyond just the Hunger Games itself. And so, while I did have some issues here and there with Mockingjay Part 1 and Part 2, I still overall really do enjoy the series. And I never thought in the 8 years that we would get a prequel to the franchise, because it seems like we live in this day and age now where we get prequels that come out every now and then that are unexpected, whether it's, they have like big gaps between movies, whether it's the Star Wars prequels, whether it's like recently earlier this year we had Pet Sematary Bloodlines, where some movies can be working good as prequels, but then other times they really fall short. And I think after going into this one, I didn't really have much expectations for it, because it was one of those kind of movies that, I was going to see because I was a big fan of the other Hunger Games films, and I just thought it would just be one of those kind of, movies that kind of comes and goes. And after upon seeing the film, I can say that this was a decent film. It took me in surprising areas that I did really enjoy, but at the same time, it did seem like it had a lot of potential that I think wasn't really fully explored, that really lost its momentum. And that really has to do where it pretty much switches gears on you, and it switches gears about an hour left of the film that I think really makes it hold back from really being where it was going to go and being on that great level. And so to get my pros out of the way, I'll say that the cast in this I thought were fantastic. Tom Blythe I thought was a really great Snow in this. Him pretty much, coming out, starting out, he's not the kind of like rich and very, kind that you would expect starting out with, because he's unpopular when he goes to the school and everything. And he has to basically prove himself to not only Peter Dinklage's character, but also with Viola Davis's character as well, with how he wants to present with the games and stuff. And the way that he comes across as trying to be on that kind of, like you can see his value, you can see his side of things, but also seeing how much he's trying to scheme into stuff, I think really works with his character arc in this and really building up with that. And they do a lot of great stuff in the first 2/3 that you really get to see a lot of it, that really has a really great ride that really took me into unsurprising areas. One of the other biggest things too is that there are some moments where like Tom Blythe really goes for it, especially in this one moment. I can't go into spoil, but he really takes it in all, and he really did a fantastic performance as this. It's really hard to compare him to Donald Sutherland, but there's a lot of great hints that you can see that, shows a lot of layers to his character on that kind of like, now I don't want to say something good, but on that very, empathetic type of side that I think really works for him as it goes along with the film. And then on top of that, the rest of the cast are great too. Rachel Zegler was good in this film, but I do have a comment for her character, and that's really more to do with the writing with hers, because I felt like there's really some stuff with her character I didn't really care too much for, and she really is kind of a nothing character for me that really stuck out. But I thought that she really pulled it off, and she does have a great singing voice, and she really does do a good performance wise. It's just I have a lot of issues with the writing for her character that really comes into play. And then the rest of the cast are great too. Viola Davis seemed like she's having the time of her life playing this really kind of, not over the top, but you can tell that she's having a lot of fun playing this kind of character that's basically running the games and stuff. Like, you can tell that she was having the time of her life in this, and she really nails it in a lot of great scenes too, especially when, she holds it back from not being too over the top, because she just does it enough to where you just can't, you just can't take your eyes off her the way that she's, commanding a lot of scenes. And then, Peter Dinklage is also a delight too, playing the guy who's the headmaster of the school and of the place that of the school and everything. I thought he was great. And one of the other surprising things I enjoy the movie the most is definitely the look of it, and also the futuristic style that they're going for. That's 60 years before the events of the first movie, and the technology isn't quite there with how it's very advanced and stuff, because it is more of a throwback to the 50s era. Because this time they're not really used to a lot of the stuff that they get from the games just yet, as it's going to try to get into more of the marketing side, and they're using these kind of like classic 50s type of technology where people are talking to each other, and the TVs and stuff definitely have that kind of look that I thought really showcased a lot of where we stand in like the early days of the world. And one of the other aspects I enjoy with as a prequel is how we get to see more of the capital side with seeing the what goes on behind the scenes of, well, if you remember Stanley Tucci's character from the Hunger Games films, this is basically his ancestor that's presenting the games and everything, and they're trying to come up with ways that they can pretty much market to the people that watch and everything. And I think that they go into really great detail with that, and it shows a lot of the whole commentary with the whole rich versus poor, but also other sub-layers where where you get other things involving with the people that are also inside the Capitol that are neither the rich or the poor. And so they go into great cool stuff with that as well with it, and I think really adds a whole lot of good mythos to the story, to the world and everything. Other big things I got to appreciate too is a lot of the action scenes are really great and well timed, and you get to. One of my problems I've had with the franchise overall is not really getting to see much blood or anything like that, but knowing that this was also based on a series of young adult novels and stuff like that, and with it, showing the other films, it shows that they do enough intensity that still solidifies, because you actually do see some really dark stuff that happens in this that is to be expected, like you saw in the other films. And they really showcase what they can with showing the intensity and really dark emotional stuff that really got to me. And then on top of that too, I got to say that great hearing some of the musical cues they hear from the other films as well. But this is now where I get into some of my cons, and I will say that even though I was really going along with the first 2/3 of how it's able to present itself as a prequel, one of my biggest issues I feel like the movie does hold back on is that, well, the first thing I have to admit is I didn't really get into much of the chemistry that was surrounding with Snow and Lucy Gray, because I felt like it did feel like it was just one of those kind of things where it's just very kind of melodramatic at times, and it gets into some stuff that I didn't really buy too much of the chemistry with the two leads, as really Lucy Gray doesn't really have much of a character to her, and I know that's the whole point with her trying to separate from Katniss from the other films, but the fact that she just comes from basically like a family of basically like road singers and stuff like that, there's really just nothing really for her that really sticks out as a character that really got me engaged. And even when they do kind of do stuff later on that kind of gets it to where, she's involved with the games itself, I didn't really feel much with it, because I just kind of thought, I was just watching just like, okay, well, I kind of have a feeling where this is kind of going, and also I just feel like, I'm not really getting that emotional attachment like I should. And that's sad because, Rachel Zegler does a really good job in the film, but it's just they don't really give her much of the material to work with, because she's really playing a blank slate in this. and there's nothing really about her that really attaches on with it. And even when they do get in some stuff really later on in the film, especially in the third act, I really felt like not only did it come across as just really resolving with their character that really seemed really off. And if that's meant to be like a book, I can understand, but it just, as a movie, the way it translates and stuff, I don't really think it really worked too well in that kind of writing and the direction that they were going with her character. But I digress. And then the other thing, too, I gotta admit, too, is that also comes into play with the third act itself, because I'm not going to go into spoilers, but the third act seems like it becomes an entirely different film, and had the movie probably would have been maybe split into, maybe, if the movie would have ended up probably around the 2/3 into it and maybe set up a sequel, I could understand probably that leading to a bigger picture. But the way it comes across with the structure in the third act, it very comes across as very slow for a while, and then all of a sudden rushing things and getting it resolved very fast, where it felt like it really had no great payoff that I was really expecting. And if the intention for this is trying to set up a new trilogy like the other films or anything like that, where they're trying to do more to add on to it, it really seems like they could have had a better payoff with at least having the where it ends in the second act. Because once it gets to the third act, it feels like this could have been more like a mini-series or had a lot more stuff going on with it that really butchers a lot of the way it plays out with its ending. And that also comes into effect with some of the other supporting characters that we spend a majority on time with, and some of them don't even really hardly get any good resolvement or payoff that comes into factor that I really latched onto. And in fact, there were some characters I was like, wait, that's it? That's kind of weird. That was very rushed and abrupt. That's what the best to describe it is, very abrupt, and it takes a lot of stuff out of it that I think that really could have had more of an impact, you know. But, and then some of the other things too is that there are some musical points in this film that do get very overdone, especially the parts where Lucy Ray is singing at times, and I could buy that in certain scenes, like at the beginning, and maybe like in context-wise, where it takes place in another scene. But they drag it out way too far, especially when it gets toward the end, when it gets toward the third act and stuff. And I felt like it was too overused, and it really feels really off. There's more I'm going into detail, but that's really the gist of it. And I think that would really, with it being that third act really holding it back for me, and some other things that I don't want to get into because of spoilers, it really falls into more of the middle for me. I'm going to give the movie just an average Joe on the Film Freaks meter. And so, for those of you who have also seen the Hunger Games, the Ballad of the Songbirds and Snakes, and also the other films in the Hunger Game and also the other films in the Hunger Game franchise, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.